What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here. I'm here with Luke G's, and we're here to talk about the Detroit Lions draft. Of course, I'm going to be going through every single team in the NFL, giving them a grade for their draft, going through each and every pick. And for a couple of these videos, I'm going to have a guest. So we have a big Detroit Lions fan and pretty much an expert on all things Detroit Lions football, here to talk about the draft and give it a grade, kind of talk about how they filled their needs and went about the strategy of their draft. So, hey man, just introduce yourself, give yourself a plug, where you're at on YouTube, and let's just get into the Lions.
All right, let's do it, man. Obviously, I'm Luke G. I think many of the Lion fans know about Luke G's Field Review, my channel, where I talk all things Detroit Lions. I do everything from film study to breaking down the coaches' interviews, the general manager interviews. I mean, heck, if the strength and conditioning coach talk, I'll break that down too. We talk draft, we talk all facts, no opinions, and we give Detroit Lions a unbiased media outlet because many of the people who live here in Michigan, they know that the media here is absolutely 1000% negative towards all our sports teams. And so therefore I wanted to be able to get Alliance a better representation based on facts.
All right, man, that sounds awesome. So go check him out over there. Go subscribe. Go check out some of the videos he's got. I've checked him out. He's legit over there. He knows what he's talking about. So let's get into the Detroit Lions. Let's just start off a little bit with what they were doing in the offseason. They had quite a good free agency. I thought it was one of the better ones across the NFL. They picked up Trey Flowers from my Patriots. They picked up Danny Amendola at receiver. They added a Justin Coleman at cornerback. So they added some pretty good players, both defensively, offensively, and really coming into this draft, it seemed like maybe just adding a tight end was a big need for them, possibly adding along the pass rush and defensive line, maybe another linebacker. So those were their big needs coming into the draft. Just go into how you think they executed their plan in the draft, and then which picks you really like and maybe any of the picks you don't like.
I mean, so far there are no picks that I do not like. The way that I look at it is totally different. I played the sport, and I kind of look at it like this: did my team feel needs? And when I walk away from this draft, it was like, yes, they did. We needed a tight end. And, you hear so many people who says, well, no team should draft a tight end in the top 10. But when I go through, when I look at the history of why tight ends are not being drafted in the tight end, I mean, in the top 10, what I realized was it was something as simple as they were in spread offenses. They didn't have their hand in the dirt. They wasn't coming out or asked to come out firing to be a blocker. And when I noticed that a lot of those teams do, when they're in that spread offense, they don't leave the tight end in to block. But when you go and look at people like TJ Hawkinson, this guy was asked to pass block. This guy was asked to run block. He was asked to run routes. He was asked to catch in the traffic. And then when he did do it, he created separation. So it was a pick that I absolutely loved, not to mention the Detroit Lions needed. When you talk to most Detroit Lions fans, and you're going to see it in your comment section when I'm done, you're going to see people say things like, but they took Eric Ebron. And my favorite, what about Brendan Pettigrew? Well, here's the thing. Eric Ebron came out, and when he came out, he had a history of dropping passes. Go and look at Eric Ebron in the playoffs. His drops continue. And people don't see that. And I'm telling them that he never had this title of a complete tight end put on him. And when you go to Brendan Pettigrew, they said, well, he's supposed to be a blocking tight end. But when you watch the film, he really wasn't. And so they try to hold that to this fact that you can't take one in the top 10. But then I go and look at the Tony Gonzalez's, the Vernon Davises, the Dallas Clarks of the world, and I just say to myself, shocking. And I even had one of my subscribers tell me, where he is no Rob Gronkowski. I say you're right, because if you actually go and look at their college stats and their college careers, the numbers are very even with very few small margins. So for me, I love that pick. They feel the need. They feel the need for tight end. We have not had a tight end, and I mean, I can't even remember Charles
Yeah,
Sanders.
I don't think they've had one in quite some time, at least since I've been a football fan, to be honest. So, I mean, they've tried to address that position. They've tried,
Right.
like you said, with Eric Ebron, who never really worked out, even though he's had success with the Colts more as a receiver, but not as a complete tight end. And this is where I really, because I did project in my mock draft that the Detroit Lions would pick TJ Hawkinson. The reasoning is because we know that Matt Patricia and the way that Bob Quinn is trying to mold this team is in a similar fashion to the Patriots, but they want to commit to flexibility on offense, scheme versatility. And in order to do that, you need a tight end that can both block and receive and catch the football. And he's an athlete. And I think that's something when you talk about Brandon Pettigrew, I never saw the athleticism from him. You know, he's a
Nope,
bigger
he
tight
won't.
end. He's not an athlete like Hawkinson. And then you look at Eric Ebron, he's not a blocker like Hawkinson is. So I agree with both of those points. And Hawkinson, what he can do for you is he can, like you said, he can play in line, block in the run game, in the pass game, and he can also receive. You can move him around to the outside if you want to. You can play him in the slot. So you can do so many different things. It allows Matthew Stafford to have a target in the middle of the field, which he desperately missed last year after you traded Golden Tate. So I feel like Hawkinson just allows your offense to open up in new ways, whether that's in the run game, which the Lions wanted to commit to with their Kerryon Johnson pick from last year and some of the offensive linemen they've brought in, or it's in the passing game by helping out Matt Stafford with another weapon.
You know, it's funny because too often people don't realize this. If you go and look at the Lions' history, the Lions' best record to date has always been 12-4. They've never had a record higher than 12-4, right? But that record only came in 1 year. That was 1991 when we went all the way to the NFC Championship game and lost to the Washington Redskins. Now, here's the difference. When they did that, they were running the ball. People had a healthy fear of Barry Sanders. And when I look at Kerryon Johnson, and after what he did to the New England Patriots, after what he did to the Miami Dolphins, heck, what he did to the Dallas Cowboys in the first half, you know, people forget too often that the Lions were going to come out to establish the run. Everything they've done has been to the run. They go out and get an offensive coordinator who has a history of running the ball but being able to adapt. They go out and sign a running back coach who has had multiple 1,000-yard rushers from the Cincinnati Bengals. They then turn around in the offseason, add Jesse James for what? To be a blocking tight end. And why? Because two tight end sets create mismatches for defenses. You don't know what's going on. But if that's not enough to add insult to the injury to show that they're trying to win a division, they wait to the 7th round to add another tight end so they can come out in more complex sets that's going to confuse people. Bob Quinn, from the time he has been in Detroit, has said repeatedly that there are 5 characteristics that he would like to see in all of his players, not just some players, all of his players. And those 5 characteristics have held true to this day. And those 5 characteristics are: he wanted people with high football IQ, high character, who was a passionate player, who was competitive, who had versatility. And on top of that, he says he's looking for players with size. Everyone he took has size. The linebacker we took out of Hawaii led all of the NCAA in solo tackles. He's 6'2", 250 or something like that. You know, they come out in the second round, take safety, which is another need. He's 6 feet. I mean, everybody they took is big. The cornerback, Awore, 6 feet or 6'1" or something like that. I mean, nobody they took was short.
And I think the big thing that to add on to that is not only the size, but I think the toughness is important. Like the Lions want to commit to toughness. The reason why they want to run the ball, the reason why they brought in Darrell Bevel, the offensive coordinator, is because they want to run the ball, but in running the ball, you become a tough team. And then through Patricia's defense, you can become a tough team by adding some players like Damon Snacks Harrison, who's one of the toughest players defensively in the league. Trey Flowers, a proven winner. You know, these players are tough. These players are going to establish a character among their teammates and among the team. So that's very important to that style of what they're trying to bring to this team. So let's just look at kind of the picks that the Lions had outside of the first round. So we've addressed TJ Hawkinson. Outside of that, you brought up their linebacker that they got from Hawaii. What do you really think he brings? Obviously, he could probably be a starter. Just looking at their depth chart, I mean, they have Gerard Davis, who has shown some flashes with his athleticism in the past. But outside of that, Christian Jones and those players are kind of depth sort of guys or decent role players, but not necessarily every down starters. Do you think that they could get a starter there with their second round pick?
I absolutely think he's a starter. The thing that jumped out to me is when you watch his film, every film that I've watched with him that he was in, I've seen him in that one game play DN, outside linebacker, and inside linebacker. Okay? You can move him around like that throughout a defense. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. It's one thing to say like if let's say we had a Ray Lewis. If I put Ray Lewis at DN, ain't nobody paying attention to Ray Lewis, right? If I put Ray Lewis at outside linebacker, I may take a look over there, but he's not going to have that same effectiveness like he would from the middle. So I know he's a middle linebacker. With this guy, you don't know what he is. You don't know if he's a middle linebacker. Is he outside in this play? Is he the DN? There's a level of confusion with this player that I love, because when I watched him, not only was he getting pressure, he was like literally using pass rush moves. You know, he was doing things that I was praying that linebackers do, like disengage from the blocker. And so to me, the biggest problem is most people hated the pick because of what? They didn't know who he was. So because they didn't know who he was and he wasn't a name, they say it's a bad pick. And it's just not true. We didn't know who Darius Leonard was, but guess what? We do now.
Yeah, with Matt Patricia's scheme as well, and just that sort of defensive scheme in general, he likes bigger linebackers, and he likes players that can do a lot in their versatility. But he also loves to blitz his linebackers. So that's something when you're big, when you're 6'2", 250 or something. I think that's close to his measurables of what he is. Imagine trying to be a running back that's 5'10", 200 pounds, whatever, and you're trying to block this guy coming full speed downhill. So that's something that probably they're going to incorporate a little bit more with the size at linebacker that they got here in the second round.
And it's not just that; it's also the idea that he's sticking to the idea of scheme in the part of versatility. A lot of Lion fans, I realize this, if they are fans of Michigan, the University of Michigan, or they're fans of the Michigan State, what you see is they always want those players on the Lions. And I just find it funny. So when I hear all these fans who say, well, we could have took people like this Devin Bush, I'm thinking, what can he play out besides outside linebacker? You know, if you put him at middle linebacker, the question now becomes, okay, if he's at middle linebacker, can he rush up the middle and create pressure? Some are going to say yes, but the film does not prove that. The film don't show that. If a blocker gets on Devin Bush, he's blocked. Okay. And I think too often people just want the name. If they would have said a name that people knew, like Greedy Williams, who refused, like I can show on film Greedy Williams letting people run past him and then try to shoestring tackle him. This is not me being funny. This is what the film show. Okay. You know, you can go and look at his games and people say, oh, well, he did a good job against DK Metcalf. And I go, no, DK Metcalf did a good job against DK Metcalf because he kept dropping passes. You know, so when you look at the film and the footage of Greedy Williams, you know, because these are people that we could have took according to the Lion fan base. Look at the film of Greedy Williams and tell me what school does you recognize that you see him in the highlights doing something good against. You won't see it.
Well, I'll defending Greedy Williams. I think in terms of pure coverage, he was probably the best corner in the draft, pure covering. And
I would disagree with you strongly.
There's certain like aspects, certain intangibles and skills that you want for certain schemes, which is, I think, what your point is you want certain attributes in your scheme. And when it comes to Matt Patricia's defense and his scheme, you don't want a linebacker like a Devin Bush who's smaller, can't really get off a block, because that's really what he's going to be asked to do, is get off blocks. Meanwhile, I like Devin Bush in Pittsburgh because he's in a different scheme. He can kind of clean up the trash in the second level. He doesn't really need to get on blocks so much and try and block shed guys. He's just kind of waiting to make a play and going sideline to sideline. So it's kind of different players for different schemes.
Right.
What do you think of? I think an interesting player. Of course, they picked Will Harris in the third round, defensive back from Boston College. The one that I'm kind of interested in is the 4th round pick, Austin Bryant from Clemson, just because he's sort of a name. He's from Clemson. That was a defensive line that was awesome last year in college football. They had all four of them drafted. So do you have any thoughts on Austin Bryant? Because I know that was probably, outside of tight end, I would say the biggest concern for the Lions, in my opinion, my personal opinion, was their pass rush coming into this year. Just talk about Austin Bryant a little bit. What do you see from him?
I love Austin Bryant's game. I think when you look at Austin Bryant, he's going to be used similar to how they used Deshaun Hand, or where you move him around across the entire line. He could be in the 3 to 5. I mean, the 0. It doesn't matter. They're going to keep him constantly moving so he can create the mismatch. The thing about the system is that they're looking for people who can win the 1-on-1. Even when we talked about Greedy Williams, he's looking for people who can win the 1-on-1, and he's looking for people who can win the 1-on-1 and complete the transaction, i.e. tackle. And so that's when, I look at people like Austin Bryant and I go, wow. Now, even when I look at the fact that where they had him graded at, we took him in the 4th, and I saw that he was graded for as a 4th or 5th round pick. So you got him at there in terms of value. But I think that next pick was the more impressive pick with the cornerback, Amani Oruwariye out of Penn State. This is a guy that I'm surprised slid to the 5th. I think personally he was probably the 3rd best cornerback in this draft. And I would have loved that we got Byron Murphy, but the Cardinals took Byron Murphy, and I think Byron Murphy was the number 1 corner in this draft. But when I look at Austin Bryant, based on where we picked him up, how he's going to be used, the fact that I can stand him up as an outside linebacker and rush him, I can rush him from the DN spot, I can rush him from the D tackle spot. It's a phenomenal pick, because guess what? We needed a need for it, but our pass rush is not going to come from the D line. It comes from the linebackers. Even when you look at the New England Patriots, all their pressure and their sacks come from the linebackers. They use the D linemen to hold spots so they can, do what they have to do. And that's what you get. So to me, that's what I'm saying. It's another need that needed to be filled, and they got it. And I think they nailed it with the right person, because he's not small neither.
Yeah, so they add to their defensive line. You brought up the corner. They pretty much, like you said at the beginning, they addressed all the needs that they really needed.
Everyone.
They addressed all levels of their defense as well. So they addressed their pass rush / defensive line. They addressed their linebacking core. They addressed their corner position with Amani, and they already signed Justin Coleman, who last year was one of the better slot corners in the league. So potentially you could see Amani, even as a 5th round pick, you could see him kind of as a man corner, fix the scheme of what Patricia wants to do. I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of these guys that developed into one of your starters on the outside, playing corner on the outside of your defense at 6'2". He's pretty tall. He didn't run slow either.
And that's the thing. People, the Lions fans don't look at this. They don't look at how they're going to be used and stuff like that. They just worry about the right now. And because they don't have vision for the future, they can't foresee what's occurring and what's going to happen. But like you said, every need was addressed. We needed a wide receiver. We got one. And we didn't just get any wide receiver. We could have easily went with a name and some speedy guy to do something across the middle of the field. No, we took a receiver that blocks. Okay. And I mean, he's really good at it. Somebody who can really block. And then you go and you look at it and people say, well, oh, you took a defensive tackle in the 7th round. It's the 7th round. Give me a break. people act like because you can't take another tight end in the 7th round. Why not? You know, it's the 7th round.
Well,
Most
some of
7th
these
round picks
players
make the
don't
team.
even make it. And then the second thing is
Right.
you're looking for also depth. Like certain positions, I'll never be mad at a team for taking defensive line in the 7th round because defensive line is one of the more important positions in the NFL in terms of a variety and a wealth of bodies that you can throw at an opposing offense. Look at the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl. And even now they're building their defensive line back up. The Seahawks back when they won their Super Bowl. A lot of teams, and even to the Patriots to a certain degree, like not the wealth of talent that the Eagles had, but a lot of different guys that they can use on the defensive line. So it's always important to add to your defensive line or add to your edge rushers just because you can have that rotation of guys come in. And then the same can be said for the corner position. You want as many corners that can cover as humanly possible because injuries happen. Tight end position, you probably only need 3 on your team. So maybe he'll make it, maybe he won't. But like,
he'll make it. He'll make it.
If he's worth it, if he's good, then he's good. If he's the best player on your board, then you take him. As for, is there anyone else like in the depth of the draft? You kind of brought up most of the names. Is there anyone you're really looking forward to, whether it's a tight end, a receiver, Ty Johnson, the running back from Maryland? Any of these guys that you think will really have an impact as late round picks, maybe right away or maybe down the line?
The picks that I think are going to have the impact immediately are going to be T.J. Hockenson. I think he's going to be a huge immediate impact. I think Amani Oruwariye is going to be a huge impact. I think that the linebacker out of Hawaii, Tavi, is going to have a huge impact. But Ty Johnson is going to have his huge impact on kick and punt return. Because once we lost Jamal Agnew, our special teams were dead in the water. So he now shores up that part of the game for us, so he'll have an impact. But the crazier part is the Detroit Lions have done something that I have not seen in none of the years I've ever been on this earth, and that is they are winning the undrafted free agent war and battle. They just signed Bo Ben-Chua, offensive lineman out of Wisconsin. They picked up linebacker Trey Lamar from Clemson. They added Malik Carney from University of North Carolina, and they added a host of other people who were on their board that they visited with that had rankings. And the crazy part about it is when you look at people like Bo Ben-Chua was supposedly to be drafted between the 3rd and the 5th round, according to the so-called experts. He goes undrafted, and then he gets offers from 20 teams, and says, nope, I'm going to Detroit. Our general manager, for the first time in like ever has won on all fronts. So not only did he draft and fill all our needs, he goes into the offseason, get the best offensive lineman in the offseason, in the undrafted free agent class to come here. That's impressive. It's very impressive.
That's pretty important too. I know a lot of people will kind of scoff at the undrafted tag, and a lot of people won't really, how many of them
they don't know better.
Out.
They don't know better. They don't know that. They don't know that people
undrafted free agents are a big deal in the NFL. Like, if you can have 2 or 3 make your team, that's a pretty big deal. And a lot of them, like, look at J.C. Jackson last year for the Patriots, ends up being a starting corner, ends up helping them win the Super Bowl. Those type of players can change your team from season to season and in the future of your team. Because if one of those guys can hit and one of those guys can be a star, not only are you not paying him very much money for like 4 or 5 seasons until you have to end up paying him, but he's taking a spot from a guy that you potentially would have to pay a lot of money for, or you can move on from a guy that's making more money in place of that undrafted free agent. Ty Johnson, I didn't even know this. He ran at 4.28 at his combine. He didn't go to the combine. At his pro day, he ran at 4.28. That's pretty ridiculous.
And it's funny because a lot of the people, they put a knock on players and say, oh, this, that's one of the biggest knocks that they give to the linebacker we took. Oh, he wasn't invited to the pro day. And the point that you touched on and talking about the undrafted guys, John Randall was undrafted. Antonio Gates was undrafted. James Harrison was undrafted. Warren Moon was undrafted. Kurt Warner was undrafted. There were so many undrafted players who were absolutely stars and amazing for what they done. And too often we as fans just want to say, well, if they wasn't drafted, they wasn't any good. That's just not true. It's just not true. And the interesting part about it is the guys that we picked up as undrafted free agents, they're going to make the team. That's what's even more interesting about this. So he kills the draft on all our needs, go into undrafted free agency, and still gets more talent that are going to make the team. This was a win-win on every front. And I think that too often most people don't want to believe it, but we're getting back to the black and blue division where it's going to be smash mouth football. And I got to be honest, I got the Detroit Lions going 11-5 and winning the division. But even with the pieces that we added, nothing has changed my mind. Like, I know that the Bears had a good draft. I know that the Vikings did okay. The Green Bay Packers, we're going to pray for them. I don't know what they were doing, but I can tell you this. For the people who think that the tight end would have been there at a later round, he wouldn't have. For the people who think that we could have got a better linebacker, I would ask you to name me the linebacker who can play inside, outside, and DN. Who was that guy?
All right. So if you had to give a grade for this class, what would it be?
My early prediction grade right now is going to be an A. It's going to be an A draft. We fill all the holes on our team in one draft and one offseason. And I can't tell you the last time I've seen any team do that. Every hole. I mean, if somebody want to say, well, we didn't replace the quarterback, there's nothing wrong with Matthew Stafford. For a guy to be playing for 10 years and never have a rushing attack in the top 15, it's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. To be amongst the most sacked quarterbacks is ridiculous.
I've been a fan of Matthew Stafford, so I've been defending him. And I was pretty harsh on the Lions going into last season because I didn't think they did enough in the offseason. And I ended up being right. And I think I'm a lot more positive on them this year. I'm not quite sure if they're 11-5 and playoff ready, but they're definitely a lot more talented. They had a great draft, in my opinion. I would probably give them probably like a B plus, probably a B plus. I'm not sure if I'm quite going an A, but I really liked TJ Hawkinson, that pick in the first round. I think that really, like, honestly, that kind of completes their offense, what you're really looking at there. Defensively, they addressed every level of their defense, which we touched on. Maybe they could have gotten a pass rusher earlier in the draft, but really that's just nitpicking. So overall, I think we both see the Lions as a team that are improved, and we both see this draft being very successful for them going forward. Luke, do you want to plug your channel once again at the end here?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's Luke G's Fear Review. Definitely come check it out, man. Even if you're not even a fan of the Lions, I am open to all conversations that is football. And, you know, as long as you want to have a constructive, intelligent conversation, I am down for it. You know, I do know that many people thought that we should have gotten a pass rusher in the earlier rounds, but the question really boils down to who is he replacing? You know, if you take a D tackle, he's not replacing Snacks. He's not replacing A'Shawn Robertson. You know, so who is he replacing? So for me, I think everything worked out the way it should have. I totally appreciate you know, having me on so we can talk real football versus this other stuff people doing and, you know, and random stuff, and being able to collaborate and stuff, and hopefully get you around to getting on my channel, because like I said, I have so much coming for my channel too, and I like finding people who understand how sports work. And this day and age is rare because all people do is play fantasy football and Madden, and it makes it really hard on us.
Hey, man, I understand. Anytime you can come back, we'll talk about the Lions once again. Probably a little bit closer to when the season gets underway. I'll have to have you back on the channel.
Absolutely.
I'll come on your channel whenever, and we can connect on that. Obviously, you can message me. But that's it for our draft grade and our draft analysis for the Detroit Lions in 2019. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, Gronk, spike that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's Mitch and Luke. Peace out.